In answer, it's just you've got to know where to look for it. There's always some rational explanation. And in this little drama that I've created, Sherlock Holmes thinks, okay, maybe the door mechanism isn't how we always believe it to be. Maybe there's some kind of remote agent, or the door is unlocked by sound waves or pressure waves. So, aha, Sherlock Holmes has solved the crime. And really what I want to get across is this is, in a way, where we are with science at the moment, is that we are faced with things that seem impossible. And most scientists, because of their conditioning and their beliefs, are just not able to look at things in that different way, because we know how a door locks. It always works like that, and that's the way it is. However, we do need to start looking at things in a different way. And I think some of the people that we've had speaking today and some of the things that we're going to be talking about is showing that we are starting to look at some of this science in a different way. And that's really how we're going to start to generate real empirical evidence of what we know to be true. So I'm going to tell you, it's not so much of a who did it. I'm going to take you on a journey of a how did it. So how is the medium of information, how is that actually transmitted into the body? How do we get the information into these infoceutical bottles? What is the invisible agent that I'm referring to? How does that information then exert its effect on the body? Again, these are things which are, by conventional medical standards, seemingly impossible, and yet they are happening. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the latest research and evidence that we've got for that. And a little bit about quantum leaps that we are making on our own R&D by going around, as Justin said, Harry and I are making a new film called Supercharged. And in making that film, we've had access to some really incredible scientists who really are changing the way that we look at biology. And when we just heard Jerry Pollack, I mean, really, these are very different concepts. And by learning all of this and going around and learning from these scientists, we've been able to make huge, actually, advances in what we're doing here at NES. So that's fantastic. Now, I'm hoping this will work. This is another of my, this is one of my fellow colleagues.
We think reality is what we can
It's Russell Brand.
Portion through the limited instruments of the senses, but reality is, of course, far beyond that. Spiritual data, we don't have the correct instruments to receive it, and we live primarily in the realm of the senses. Anything that we're describing through science, we're describing through the prism of the 5 limited senses. Our eyes can only see between infrared light and ultraviolet light. There's light bouncing around everywhere. Our ears can only hear a tiny decibel range, can't hear the noise of a dog whistle, can't hear any high-pitched frequency sounds. Isn't it likely, then, that there are other vibrations, frequencies, energies, consciousness moving through the universe?
Well said, Russell. Well said, Russell. I mean, he's just so passionate. It's just good to hear him. But what I wanted to get from that little bit of talk from Russell Brand is, what he's saying is we are very limited, one, by our own bodies. I mean, we filter the environment and we filter things through these, well, in effect, these meat suits that we find ourselves in. We are filtering through our 5 senses. And really, up until very, very recently, we didn't have technology to see anything that was beyond those physical senses. And it's really only very, very recently that, with the advent of the microscope, and now we're starting to get, bigger microscopes, electron microscopes, we're starting to have the devices that are enabling us to actually measure some of these effects of these fields that we really were completely oblivious of, really up until 100 years ago. And things like quantum physics, which is, again, a very, very new science in the history of the science that we're dealing with in this age we live in now, really these ideas are only just filtering down into us. And the reason why is because it goes outside of this way that we normally experience the world. And it's very different to try and think of quantum physics concepts when we live in a world which has a different, everything appears real. This seems like, although we know this is space, it's different because this is how it appears to us. So really what I want to suggest is we're having to think in a completely different way with this new field of quantum physics and integrating that. And also, we're now starting to get new measurement devices that we really didn't have before. And and I'm hoping I'm going to guide you through some of these new measurement techniques that are allowing us to see fields and informational fields and electromagnetic fields that really we haven't had access to before. So really it's quite exciting that we're starting to see this quantum biology, quantum physics coming into biology, but more importantly, we're actually starting to get measurement devices that are allowing us to actually see the seemingly impossible. So this is one of my favourite Sherlock Holmes actors, Benedict Cumberbatch, and his famous quote is, "What's the point in being clever if you can't prove it?" And really, you know, we've got all these fantastic tools and techniques, but if we want to get the message out to the wider world, we really need to prove it, and we need to generate evidence, and it needs to be evidence that is going to be recognised, and it needs to be legitimate. So going back to our invisible agent. So we know that there is an invisible agent that allows information to exert its effect, and the reason that we know is because we've seen it and we've experienced it, and we've been, certainly at NES, when we've been on this now for over 12 years, and we've got huge amounts of anecdotal feedback, many people who have benefited from these therapies. So we know it's real. Now we need to go about piecing it all together, finding the mechanisms so that we can know exactly where we want to look when we start to generate some evidence. So I'm hoping that you're going to get the theme of this conference, that a lot of it is about water, of course. And we just had that fantastic talk from Jerry. So I'm actually going to go over it. So it's going to be a little bit of repetition, but I think it's so fundamental and important that I think it's worth it. So water is unique. It's the most abundant compound in the universe, and this is a quote that I got from off of a news thing that said they've now found that water is abundant even in different universities and on different planets, which again raises completely different things about what life there might be on other planets. But just for now, let's just say on Earth, it's the most abundant compound on Earth. About 75% of the human body is water, depending on how old you are and how well you've looked after yourself. And we're a staggering 99% water molecules. Now that is amazing when you think about it. And this is something, actually, Harry and I were having a bit of a chat about this. And Harry said, well, if we're 99% water molecules, why do scientists spend so long looking at the 1%? You know, when the drug industry, you're really just looking at 1% of what's going on in the body. The rest of the body is water. So really, there should be so much more attention paid on water science, because really that's what we are. That's what we're made of. We are water beings. So water is a bit weird. It does have some really weird properties, but these weird properties of water are what it makes it so perfect for life. It's a dipole molecule, charge separated, and I know I don't have to explain that to you now because you know all about charge separation. It's got a high heat capacity and a high thermal conductivity, which is very useful for warm-blooded mammals like ourselves, so that we can adapt to hot and cold environments. It's solid. When it's a solid, it floats on the liquid, which again is a very weird property, but again very handy if you're a fish or if you happen to live in ponds, because it enables us to maintain life, again in even harsh environments. It charge separates when it's next to a hydrophilic surface, and I think Jerry explained all about how water has this amazing ability to act as a battery when you get the separation of the charges that are on the molecule. And I'm also going to suggest to you that it's quantum coherent. And I know this is something Jerry didn't talk about, but this again is where we get this quantum biology coming into water science. There are a lot of scientists now who are suggesting that there's definitely a quantum aspect to water. And that's something that I'm going to go through with you all. So this is the Mickey Mouse water molecule. Again, this is just showing you how you've got this different set of charges on, depending on whether you've got the oxygen, which is electronegative, and you've got the hydrogens. And the hydrogens can form hydrogen bonds, which means the hydrogens like to attach to other hydrogens and also other elements that are also electronegative. Again, this is where the protein things come in, because water likes to bond with other molecules in the body. And that's very important for understanding how information works in the body. Now this character here is someone that I'd like to introduce you to. This is a chap called Dr. Jack Kruse. He's a neurosurgeon turned quantum physicist. And he's someone that we've been interviewing for the film Supercharged, because he's just putting out some really, really fascinating blogs and theories and explanations about how quantum biology happens in physiology. He's got a blog, and he's a very prolific writer. There's a lot of stuff on there. And the reason that I've put it here is because whenever Jack is interviewed, he always wears his lucky purple jacket. And he's wearing that not just because it's a lucky jacket, but because of an element that he thinks is so important that he wants to embody it. And what's the element? Of course, it's hydrogen. And hydrogen lets off a purple emission spectrum, so this is what he's trying to get across. But really, it's the hydrogen bonding in the water where we see this propensity for the water to hold memory and information. And I think Jerry did touch a bit on that at the end of his talk. But you'll recognise this slide. This is one of Jerry's slides. And you'll remember how Jerry was talking about how you have solid ice, which is bonded quite tightly, so it's quite a solid lattice ordered network. And then here we have this gel-like fourth phase of water, which has got the hydrogen bondings with a phase shift. So the bondings are not quite so strong, so you still have the fluidity, but you also have the order. So hydrogen bonding then allows for what is known as structured water. And water becomes structured where you've got order, where you've got that very nice ordered network. And as Jerry's suggested, it can be that easy water. And also some other scientists have put forward other theories for coherent domains and other kinds of structured water, maybe with different shapes. It's something it's so cutting edge, it's still being elucidated now. But really, it has huge, huge implications for biology. And I'm suggesting here that all memory and information transfer might begin with this hydrogen bonding in water. So it's so interesting for us and the work that we're doing to really explore this new water science. So these are some interesting things about this structured water. It has a hexagonal structure, as far as we can see here. It's stable. Again, that's very important when we're thinking about information in the body and how we use water as a carrier for information, is that these structures are stable. And there's been a lot of evidence to show that these structures can be stable for days, weeks, even years. So again, you can see how that changes the way that we look at water in the body. And they can change shape depending on what the water comes up against, and it's dynamic, it's shifting in the body. So we had an early clue to this in our own NES research. And these are slides that I have presented before. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of Dr. Emoto, who famously did all of those experiments where he was looking at structured water after he'd exposed it to either a healing intention or some kind of emotion. And we sent our own NES Infoceuticals off to the Emoto laboratory to have them analysed. And this was quite a number of years ago now. I'm thinking maybe 6 years. And we had these lovely patterns come back. And this first one is just the infoceutical mixture before imprinting. And you can see we get a fairly pretty crystal, but it doesn't seem to be particularly ordered. And then after imprinting with Source Driver, we see this lovely hexagonal shape of the crystal. So we're sort of looking back on this now with this new knowledge that we have. It sort of was an early clue that what we're actually working with when we're thinking about information imprints in water is some kind of structure to the water. Okay, so easy when you know the secret. And of course, Jerry's told us a lot of stuff about easy water, and if you haven't read Jerry's book, The Fourth Phase of Water, I really recommend it. It's a fantastic book because it's very easy to read, and it uses real life examples to go through. I mean, some of the books that are written on this kind of thing that I'm going to tell you about a bit later are quite technical, but really this is a really good one. There was a precedent to all this water research, and I don't know, does anybody know Jacques Benveniste? I'm sure a lot of people would have already looked into some of this stuff. Well, Jacques Benveniste published a paper on the memory of water back in 1988, and he did a lot of research on it. He was actually a very credible French scientist. I think he was up for a Nobel Prize, and he was looking at allergy medicines, and he was doing some work on dilutions actually, and he found some strange results in that if he diluted his substances to a point where actually there was none of his substance left in the water, he still found an effect. Of course, this is something that is impossible because it's not in the way that we know water works. And he published in Nature, but he actually later was forced to retract that because they investigated him, and it was quite bizarre because they sent the amazing Randy along to the lab as part of the investigation team, who was actually a fraud buster who usually worked looking at frauds with magicians on stage. So you can see how how science has sort of worked in that way, that even though the evidence is there, some of them are saying, well, no, it's not possible, it's fraud, and some of them are saying, oh no, well, there's some other thing going on. Actually, his results have been repeated a number of times since, and probably about 10 years ago, it was repeated at Belfast University by a lady called Madeleine Ennis, she has published her results, and it's starting to being looked at again now with this new eyes and new water sciences coming in. Some of his data, I've noticed, is starting to be re-evaluated. Unfortunately for Jacques Benveniste, not in his time, because he passed away before any of it is going to be vindicated, and unfortunately he was discredited. But I just wanted to sort of have this history to water research so you can have some kind of background and see some of the history and where it's come from. And this is another chap who has some history in water research. This is Gilbert Ling. And the reason that I've included Gilbert Ling is because Peter Fraser, who first produced the infoceuticals for us, was very influenced by Gilbert Ling and read up a lot on the stuff that he was doing. And he was really one of the forerunners in looking at charges in the body and how charges on the cell affect physiology. And some scientists credit him for helping to develop the MRI scanners, where that uses the charges on water actually to make an image of the body by using a magnet to line up these dipoles of water, and then seeing what happens when you turn the magnet off and the water goes back to its original position. So again, very interesting chap. Some of his stuff's starting to be revisited. I would say read his book, but it's really, really complicated. I've read it about 5 times, and I still need to read it another couple of times. But again, his ideas now are crucial in understanding, okay, how does charge, quantum effects, structured water, what impact does that actually have on what we're doing now? Albert St. George, again, another very, very famous scientist. And he predicted that water next to membranes would show a voltage difference. Again, this is something that was beyond his measurement techniques at the time, but now this has proved to be the case. And he famously said, proteins are nothing but impurities in water. And I think actually he was being a bit tongue-in-cheek when he said that, but the point he was trying to get across is it's not the proteins in the body that are doing the work, actually, it's the water, because it's the water that allows for the protein to do its thing. Because if you think in each cell, each molecule of protein is surrounded by thousands and thousands of molecules of water, and it's actually the way that the water is moving and the charges on the water that allow the proteins to exert their function, which of course has huge implications for the way that the body's working, and it has huge implications for protein expression and epigenetics and whether or not DNA is responsible for some of the functions in the body, because now we're starting to see, aha, it's actually the water interacting with the proteins that has the effects rather than the other way around. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about this new quantum age in wellness. And I'm going a little bit further than Jerry did here because although Jerry's come at this from a classical point of view, some of these scientists are coming at it from a quantum point of view. Actually, there is some convergence in some of these ideas, which again is very satisfying because it sort of, when you have a convergence in any ideas in science, it sort of makes you think, okay, there's definitely something here when you have lots of scientists from different backgrounds saying the same thing. And probably the most famous scientists who started looking at the quantum electrodynamic effects are Del Giudice and Preparata, who really looked at something called quantum coherence in water. And quantum coherence is really to do with order and structure in water. And in fact, it's almost like another way of saying that water is ordered and structured. And that's what they mean by quantum coherence. And so there is an interaction then between these ordered, structured, charged water molecules and electromagnetic fields. Again, which is hugely interesting for us because we live in a huge electromagnetic field. Really, the Earth is a huge electromagnetic field, and we're exposed to electromagnetic fields. And it's something to think about when you think of, how we're also exposed to a lot of artificial electromagnetic fields and how that's impacting our biology. So there's a lot of scientists now who are really beginning to explore that in a lot of detail. And again, very interesting for us because it allows us to really understand better the physiology and how you can get information transfer and how we can then maybe integrate that knowledge into what we're doing. This is the Luc Montagnier experiment, which Jerry's already described for us, so I'm not going to go into it again, but Luc Montagnier was a Nobel Prize scientist. He's able to say all these things, I think, perhaps because he's got that credibility, and now he can actually start to do this kind of experiment and get listened to. So that's fantastic. And this is, a very groundbreaking experiment where he's found that he had an information transfer using electromagnetic fields in water. This is Dr. Mei-Wan Ho. Again, really a frontier scientist. We actually interviewed her as well for the Supercharged movie. So this is Mei-Wan and I over at Christmas. And she's recently published a book that followed on for her original book, which was The Rainbow Worm. She's now published a new book called Living Rainbow H2O. Again, very, very interesting book where she explores the quantum nature of water. And so here at the side, I've sort of illustrated what we've got here. You've got your solid phase of water, you've got your ice, you've got your fourth phase of water, the liquid crystal phase, and then your liquid water where you've got a random movement. So what Mei-Wan is saying is that where you've got this liquid crystal and you've got a coherence in the water, that's what allows for quantum effects happening in the body because you have a coherence. And you have this coherence because you have this ordered way that water is working. So this made us go back and think about the living matrix again because, I'm sure most of you may have seen one of Harry's previous films, Living Matrix, and we explored the collagen network in the body. But with these new learnings about water, we can get a different understanding of the living matrix because it's still the collagen network, but now we know that the collagen in the body is totally hydrated and surrounded by this water. And this water is forming coherences and like it allows instantaneous communication because it's acting like a liquid crystal. And I was talking to Dr. Reiner earlier, and we were thinking, this could actually account for some of the things that we see that are not accounted for, like meridians, like some of the structures that we have in the NES system. Certainly I'm thinking that maybe when we're looking at energetic rejuvenators in the body and we're seeing areas where there are energetic blockages and distortions, I think we're looking at, in some aspects, the water around the collagen in the body, and the blockages maybe are areas of decoherence or a change in energy that's negatively affecting the body. So again, this is it's hugely important for us to get an understanding of exactly what we're seeing, but certainly there's a lot of research about collagen in the body and how collagen is hydrated, and about how it's actually the water that's allowing for that communication on this network, the living matrix energy network. So this is just to summarize, liquid crystal structure of water enables the transfer of information and the transformation of energy in the body. And then if we're thinking about infoceuticals contain information structures that are read by the body via this network of structured water along with the living fascia of the body. And these messages have a direct effect on water structure. So again, any kind of environmental message we're receiving through the water in our bodies, really. And this explains how, we do have different effects when we're in different places that may have non-native EMF, why we do feel better when we charge ourselves outside and stand on the ground and get electrons from the ground. So this is a nice way that we're starting to understand information transfer in the body based on charges on water and the water network in the body. And as I said before, this also gives us more insight into epigenetic changes, which just means changes above the gene in the body, that water actually allows for protein unfolding and folding. So this, and even in genetic material. So the water you have in your body, the amount that it's structured or coherence will very much impact how proteins operate in the body. So it's very important that we understand information and energy in relation to the water in the body, because it's fundamental even at the genetic expression level. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these new people that are coming on and who are shedding some light on this science. Again, I've spoke about Dr. Chak Cruz, really interesting character. He's a self-proclaimed theoretical quantum biologist. And one of his quotes is, "Water allows the quantum dance in all of us." And we're only just beginning to understand and unfold its mysteries, which is totally correct. I mean, we really are at the forefront of this water science, and it's only just starting to be integrated into physiology. And it's gratifying to see that a lot of this is actually going mainstream. It's not so much in the realm of alternative medicine anymore. I mean, this is Jim El-Khalili and John Joe McFadden. They're very famous scientists from England, done a lot of BBC programmes, and this is a book that was written last year called Life on the Edge, The Dawn of the Quantum Age of Biology. Really fascinating, and a lot of the stuff in this book covers how there are quantum effects in the body, and how all different things in the body that really have been taken for granted, like sense of smell and, how birds are navigating, and lots of different examples of how actually quantum effects are happening in the body, and it is starting to be recognised and integrated, and they've now got a whole research department at the University of Surrey that are starting to look into this. So again, it's getting to the point now where people are starting to really investigate it in a big way. So we think this might be a case of imprint found, and of course it's very, very exciting for us to start to get a really understandable mechanism for how we think our imprinting is working, and how we're able to maintain a stable imprint in water. So this is obviously research that we're now building on. And so I just want to talk a little bit now about measurement devices and research, and how we are moving on with our own research based on these new findings. This is a Russian chap, Korenbaum, and he's been doing some really interesting devices where he's developed different spectroscopy techniques that enable him to actually see differences in imprinted and unimprinted water samples. And he's actually going to attend the conference tomorrow. We were hoping to get him for the whole time, but he's going to come tomorrow, and I'm hoping he's going to just go a little bit through some of his data with us, because we're going to be working with him, and we're going to be generating some of these results for ourselves, putting our infoceuticals through this kind of process. But really this is something that we haven't been able to do up until now, because we just didn't have the measurement devices. I mean, all of these techniques are very new techniques, and they're only just being developed. This particular paper was published in 2013. This actually I got from the Water Journal, which is Jerry Pollock's journal that he's the editor of. But yeah, very, very interesting for us because we're now beginning to get the measurement tools that we need in order to gain that evidence that, you know, we really do need in order to push it out. This is another laboratory experiment. This is William Tiller's lab. Now, William Tiller is, again, very famous for doing a lot of experiments in this kind of arena. He did a lot of experiments looking at intention devices and how you can actually imprint intention onto water samples and change the pH and various things. He's now doing some research in his laboratories where he's looking, now that we have somewhere to look, he's looking at for this 270 nanometer range where we have a high absorption for structured water. And you can see from the graph here, if you look at the red and blue lines, you can see a clear peak at 270. And this again is using a subtle energy imprinted water sample. And we've been speaking to Dibble, and we're going to be working with this lab in the coming months, putting our infoceuticals through this same testing and generating this kind of data. So hugely, hugely important and exciting for us. And this is another laboratory that we're using. This is an American laboratory. Again, finding different ways. Now we've got somewhere where we can look and we can really aim our studies. We're going to be looking again at this kind of different, this is a different kind of UV absorption technique. And I recently actually found, when I was just looking through something, actually only this morning, a different technique, a light scattering technique that I'm going to be looking at. So I think we're just getting to a tipping point now where people are starting to take on board all this water research. People have got somewhere to look, and we're starting to generate a lot more data. And I think, you know, we're just at the start of all that, of really lovely research. And obviously we're using all this information in our infoceutical development. And we have two new infoceuticals that Dr. Reiner's going to be telling us about. And these were really developed based on the findings from the interviews, from the new research that was coming out, these very interesting scientists who are now speaking out and sharing their knowledge. And that enabled us really this year to develop a new infoceutical. So again, it's great for us because we're able to incorporate all of this new knowledge that we're now being exposed to and actually put it to practical use. So what I hope I'm trying to get through to you is that we really do see ourselves as the future for this kind of research. We really have set ourselves up to be in a good position to really be at the forefront of this. We have already got a network with a lot of the top scientists. We've got access to a lot of the labs where they're doing all this amazing research. It's probably going to be when people start to really look at water science, the actual implications for water science is probably going to be bigger than the discovery of DNA for importance of how the body works, because it's just so important. Water science, you know, we are water, we're made of water, we're completely influenced by the water. The water is describing how our environment is affecting us, and that's something that really is only recently starting to be looked at. And so it's hugely exciting for us to be able to say, okay, we're positioning ourselves to be there when this research takes off. And it's also fantastic because it does give an explanation for non-local information transfer in the body that we haven't had up to now. So again, it's huge validation for the work that we're doing. And we do intend to be at the forefront of this research by staying up to breast with this research, making sure that we're keeping on top of it and making sure we're putting our products through this same rigorous research that's being done in these labs. And I really do think we're at a tipping point. If you just Google quantum biology or water science, so much stuff is coming up in the news now. So many different people are starting to talk about it. And, you know, if you go on some of the Jack Kruse blogs, there's lots of people are coming on board and doing studies. And, yeah, it's just a very, very exciting time for us, I think, especially in our research department to really be able to utilize some of these studies. So I talked a little bit about supercharged. I'm not going to talk too much about it because that's a whole different subject for another day. But we're probably going to release it maybe at the start of next year. But we're documenting some of the real leaders in quantum biology and how it refers to not only wellness, but actually optimal performance, how we're able to go to the next level and actually use some of these findings. Now we're sort of in the wellness to really get people to be top of their game, and we're going to be interviewing some really, really interesting people. And most importantly for NES, we're going to be using a lot of these scientists to gain some real empirical evidence for information medicine. And that's it. I just want to leave you on this last quote from Sherlock Holmes, Jeremy Brett, my favourite Sherlock Holmes. There's nothing like first-hand evidence. So although I've told you a lot of this stuff about all these fancy testing gizmos and spectrographs, really, you know, if you're a real scientist, observation is the way to go. And I'm sure just by collecting your own case studies and evidence and being open to what's in front of you, that's really the best science that we have. And I urge you all to continue doing that, keep on sending your case studies so that we can also build up that side of what we're doing, because really science is observation. And that's it. I'm happy to answer questions.
See a question over here. Coming over to Dr. Lee Whitmore.
When I'm working with patients with the NES Infoceuticals, one question that I get frequently from them is what exactly, and from one of the slides that you presented, what exactly is the nature of the information that is encoded into the infoceuticals, and how exactly does that interact with body field distortions that we're trying to correct?
Yes, so this is where we feel like we've made some leaps and bounds, because really we have the information sets, which the original information sets for the infoceuticals were ones that Peter had when he did his map of the human body. So he's got basically representations of aspects of those body fields. And part of the amazing part of NES is that we were able to code those particular information sets. We're then putting these information sets through this almost the same process as Montagna did, in that we've got an electric field and we have got a direct contact with a carrier. In the infoceuticals, it's water as the carrier. And we think what we're seeing here is a reflection of those information sets held in a water carrier because of the charges in the water. When the body takes on that information, again, the body is actually changing in accordance with that information that it's getting. So it's reflecting back to the body. It's that particular optimum for that particular data set that we're looking at. So we believe that it's doing that through that interaction with the water network in the body. So again, it's something up until now that's what we thought we've been doing, but now we're starting to see how that could actually be happening with this hydrogen bonding network in the body. Like the matching, yeah.
And there's a couple of other ways to look at it. So, like in NES, we have the drivers theory of the energetic drivers, and all of this sort of tightens that up a lot. So, when you're looking at a cavity, well, we're looking inside a cell, and you've got the cell membrane, and then next to the cell membrane you have an EZ. Yeah, you basically have an EZ layer built up on the inside of a cell membrane. As I think, as Jerry's slide said, when he shone more light, there was 5 times more activity in that flow. When we're out in the sunlight, that's basically when we talk about source driver or cell driver, etc. in NES theory, that's really the mechanism. Is basically absorbing more infrared light that's able to generate energy inside the body, or inside all of those particular cavities. So, I mean, that's one way of looking at at the drivers. And then another way, I think, Sarah sort of briefly was talking about the epigenetic expression, but I want to dig further into that, because I think it's a very, very good explanation of how information or memory in water might be changing things. I wish I had a slide up, but if you were looking at a gene and then and looking at how it then chooses to then make another set of proteins. But I'll start again. So the bit that chooses an epigenetic expression is really the environment. Before the field of epigenetics, we always thought it was genes, and if you had a gene for heart disease, you would get heart disease at 50, and you were going to drop dead. And then obviously, the rise of epigenetics has sort of proven that out to be wrong, and the genes aren't as important as the epigenetic expression. What's behind the epigenetic expression is the environment, or the environmental signals. As I said, what's next to all those proteins, what's surrounding all the DNA material that then chooses it to create all those proteins that go and repair everything in your body, or either repair or grow new cells, etc. It's water. What is it in the water that then instructs it to have a different epigenetic expression? It's some form of structure. It's the information in that water, and that mechanism I'm not qualified to exactly say, and I think it's part of Jerry's research to try and get behind what those mechanisms are. But I think that to me is a really exciting cutting edge, because I think we're getting to the place. You can see it coming in the next 5-10 years, where we'll be able to see the explanation of how information and memory in water is able to is able to explain that epigenetic expression, which is really your body's healing mechanism. What happens when you heal? You create different proteins to go and repair different parts of your body. That it's right at the core of the healing process. So in NEST, when we say, if you correct the energy and information, the body's its own miraculous healer, you're activating the body's own healing system. So that water and the epigenetic expression, I think, is right. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important, and I think Sarah's just showing probably where it's going to go. If I had to take a bet, which we do generally, I think that's where the science of biology is going to go, and so that's why when Sarah's saying we're sort of that's why we're making supercharged, and we really want to get Jerry's work out there and other scientists' work out there, because, as I say, 99% of dollars has been in biochemistry. We need 99% of dollars into water research, memory of water research, because that is the central mechanism for what's activating people's healing systems. Mm-hmm. So we're making that film really just to get these ideas out, and then hopefully lots of people will fund Jerry, fund other people, and we can help create this new reality. So anyway, I just thought I'd give you the punchline.
Thanks, Harry.
Cool.
A question over here, and I'll hop over there.
You showed the slide where you had sent infoceuticals to Emoto to be photographed. Mm-hmm. Did you send all of the infoceuticals to be photographed, or just source?
We sent Source Driver and one other. Can you remember what the other one was?
I can only remember sending Source Driver. The slide up there was a Source Driver, and that's quite interesting in itself, because what Source Driver was designed to do was to basically absorb energy from the environment, so you'd have more energy, and it ended up with this hexagonal shape, which is obviously a bit similar to the hexagonal.
And the reason
we had no idea.
The reason why we didn't send more, I think, was because we were a bit sceptical, and really we were. We thought we don't.
It was a cost,
it was a cost. Yeah, probably it was a cost.
They charged for every test.
So we really just thought, okay, and we did it. It was a double-blind study. I mean, I knew which ones they were, but Paul, who was sending them, didn't know which ones he was sending, and they didn't know what ones they were analysing. And we did. I think we got 6 photos back. So we did 2 blanks and 3 actives. So we did Source Driver and 2 others. It might have been 2 other of the drivers.
How cool would it be for us to have those to be able to show clients?
Oh, you can have those.
Yeah.
They're in the training.
I think they're. I think
All
they're
the
in there.
presentations are going to be
Yeah,
online. Everything you've seen here today, you have access to.
Yes, yeah, and I think they're actually on
And
the
your permission to use it.
practitioner's site.
They're also in your pack, actually. There's a wonderful article in your pack on explaining infoceuticals, and it's got those, I think it's got those pictures in it. The only bit that's missing, it will have the spectroscopy images, but we haven't got the results back, so that article will actually get revised when we've got a little bit more evidence back.
Question here?
Actually, it's just a comment. I was thinking as I was watching Dr. Pollack and then your work, and just thinking about the field and what you're describing with the expression, it seems like from the moment we're conceived, we're bathed in water. And that water is that beautiful information exponentially creating us. And then here we are now at the other end of it, which seems to be a continuum, and we're looking back to discover ways in which that same exponential information heals us. So it's a fascinating paradox.
Oh, it's
both
fascinating
sides.
that the human fetus is bathed, it's swimming
in
around
water.
in water. Yeah,
Yes,
of course,
yes.
yeah. And,
So
and the implications for all the information that you're getting through
Yes,
that.
informing
fascinating.
everything.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
So don't drink the tap water.
A question over here?
I'm not sure I understood the answer to that gentleman's question, so I'm just, for myself, need a little clarity. In other words, I'm assuming that these different drivers are different frequencies, so I guess what he's asking is, all the clients will say, well, how did that information get in there? What is the information? Is it a frequency? I mean, I've been left to explain this without even having done it yet, to say, well, they put trace amounts of minerals in there, and I assume they kind of get a frequency that resonates with the frequencies of the energy that they put into the water, and I don't know.
Okay, so
Help me be clear on what we should say or how we should conceive it.
well, hopefully.
Yeah,
so
tomorrow,
hopefully
yeah.
the article in there has got the article in your pack has got a sort of a clear explanation, but the brief version is, so if you took normal water, it doesn't particularly build EZ layers. So all our infoceuticals have a lot of colloidal minerals in. The reason they got colloidal minerals, and we honestly, like 10 years ago, we did tests with distilled water, and they didn't actually hold the imprint particularly well. So we added more minerals, and then when we added lots of minerals, they held the imprint really well. And it's only more recently we sort of understand, have a notion of understanding behind that. But around, and Jerry will correct me, so just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think around each mineral, I think you get, or each colloid, you get an EZ layer. So you get.
Yeah, and it depends on, that's why we're actually looking at developing new formulations, constantly improving them, that's going to hold an imprint more. Because if you've got something like magnesium or potassium or something in there, the structure becomes more stable. So that enables it makes it more plastic, if you like, to hold the
imprint.
imprint.
Something we wanted to actually release at this conference was a new infoceutical mixture. Maybe I should shut up, but we didn't quite get there because we wanted to test some new mixtures against our against our existing mixtures. We wanted to create an even better structured infoceutical. But you'll get news of that in a few months' time when all that's tested out.
Is the information, where does it come from? Is it a frequency?
No, sorry, we didn't get to that bit. No, it's all numbers. It's all numbers. So, back 110 years ago, there's a field, I think there's the field of radionics was born. I think it was about 110, 120 years ago. And it's absolutely fascinating, but they basically had a device with dials with numbers on, and you can basically dial up sets of numbers. It's nothing to do with frequency because it's nothing to do with time. It's just pure information. It's just pure information. If you're going to ask where that information comes from, that's another question. But that was basically what Peter did. So Peter basically tested different sets of. It gets fairly complex, but if I take an example of a cell driver, it has a centrosome, it has its membrane, it has etc. So he would take different parts of the cell and he would work out a number for each component of that cell, and then he would put all of those numbers in a sequence to make it dynamic, so that it would have the particular effect we were trying to have. So in the cell driver, it was basically, well, it was to make the cell more active and to kick out toxins, etc. And we would end up with these huge series of numbers in a particular sequence which we would order, and then all of those numbers are imprinted into every bottle. So we have back in Scotts Valley, well, it's a device that we call an imprinter, but it basically carries the information in on a laser, and all the bottles go past the laser, and that carries the information through. So a little bit, I mean, it's not really the same, but an analogy would be like, like a CD recording music onto a CD. Sorry, a laser, and it's not quite the same, but it's an analogy.
And a question over here.
This is more of a comment than a question. But the way I explain it is it's mathematical algorithms, which is the universal language of everything. So the information that's going in is based on mathematical algorithms, right?
Yes.
Frank uses algorithm, don't you? You say it's an algorithm. Yes.
And
Give him your explanation. Stand up. Frank, by the way, is the person responsible for getting the My Health made, so you know he is.
Well, my explanation, I've been trying to capture it for the last 5 years. When I took the first prototype to make the devices you guys use it now together with the other colleagues. It's really, what if it's all information is represented by the numbers, as Peter was able to determine them, and he determined them empirical. He could do that, but I'm sure that there is a mathematical algorithm behind that.
Changing
And
conductivity.
at a certain point, we'll be able to to better understand that as well. That's how I see it.
And we'll be doing an extensive session tomorrow in marketing.
Yeah, maybe we did.
And part of marketing is sales, and what sales is teaching. So we're going to be going over a lot of it back then as well.
Although Sarah's got another explanation.
Well, no, it's
Let
just,
her roll.
I was just adding on to how the imprint works from the learnings that we've got that I've just elucidated here is when you've got this numerical number, I think that it is, I mean, like Russell Brand said, there are a lot of fields that we don't know. We just don't know. We don't know some things, and how some things get transplanted over, we're still working out. But I think there is a very real change in the conductivity of space when you have a representation of something and you have a receiver, such as water acts as a receiver. You actually do change the conductivity of space between what's being broadcast and what's being received. And because water is charged and it has this ability to completely reflect the environment, because that's really how we as creatures manage to live in all kinds of conditions, I think that's really what the imprint is. It's the water is acting a receiver for this message that is actually changing conductivity in a very real way, in an actual spatial 3D way.
I'd like to introduce Mary. What have you got next, Mary? Yeah. Well, I don't work, but I got you. Oh, yeah, you got.
You introduce Mary, and I'm going to swap
I'll
mics.
do a pre-intro, and then Justin can.
And well, we know that numbers represent damped oscillations, and the mass to bring them to paper to see how they look like is there. We must use what is called continued tractions. And I would offer that for maybe the next Congress, we could create a presentation and create all those interference patterns, those structures in space on the screen. And maybe it's better to be understood than what the information is. It's a lot of work to work it out, because I have to make, of the number sets, which may be 12 or 16, I have to make all those continued tractions, and then you have to draw all the graphics. It would take too much time. I couldn't do that tomorrow.
Right, so we know what Raymond's lecture is next to. Cool. I know what I was going to say. So I think it's a mutual friend of ours called Wayne Miller, who's a bit of a proponent of. He's sort of, I don't know how I'd describe Wayne. He's a bit like a lobbyer, but his wife. Well, I think his wife had breast cancer that was basically helped using energy medicine, and he's very high up in the Fed, which to me sounds a bit evil to me, but he's not evil. But he left the Fed and sort of went on a lobbying mission, and met members of Congress and all this type of stuff, and various Fortune 500 CEOs to try and get energy to try and get laws changed to energy med. So, but he introduced us to Mary Jo. Mary Jo has also been on a 20-year mission or longer.
A little bit longer.
A little bit longer. 25. Justin will give the full details. But basically, we were introduced because Mary Jo has a college in Ohio, and anyway, she's a great fan of the Living Matrix from a few years ago, and all her students were like watching the Living Matrix. And then, anyway, so we got in touch, and then me and Sarah went off to see her in October, and it's very exciting for us because it's the first time that our course, which is this diploma in bioenergetics, which Mary Jo will tell you about. I mean, we wrote that course a few years ago in England. We haven't done anything with it in the States, and it's a huge monster course of the real depth of all the depth of the material in bioenergetics. And anyway, and then Mary Jo was fortunate enough that I think a nice company called Parker Affin decided to fund the college and get this going. So basically, we now have this sort of first college in bioenergetics and doing this course. And so Mary Jo is going to tell you more about that. But after Justin introduces,
well, and
Mary
one thing
properly,
about first Harry calls me July 15th, and we talk about it. And I said, well, let me think about it. And he says, okay, I'll give you a couple of days. And then it was all downhill from there. And then they walk in to visit me in Cleveland with all the manuals.
yeah,
So you don't say no to Harry.
Don't say no to Harry.
Okay.